Today is the 11th anniversary of my 18-year-old son, Charles, my youngest child, being murdered in a case of mistaken identity. I lost a cousin, 24-year-old about to graduate Fox Temple School of Business, July 1st, 2013. And this past March 5th, I lost my last surviving son, my 30-year-old son, Dante, went to California for a weekend trip and was killed in a random drive-by. And I've literally spent the last 11 years since my son Charles was murdered trying to protect our young people on both sides of the gun.
Thank you. Jean?
God bless you all. My name's Sheen Mays. My little brother was murdered in 1979. And I am here as a victim, but I'm also here as an advocate to try and get the man out of jail who got life without parole for this senseless crime, because he was just a little one himself.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean, and thank each and every one of you for, sharing your stories with us. So now, Antoinette, prior to your loss, could you tell us what experience did you have with the criminal justice system?
Okay, I had a grandson that was murdered. I had a brother that was murdered. I had several family members that's been murdered, and I have many family members incarcerated. And the criminal justice system they have no compassion. They don't care. In my experience at the beginning, I'm talking 30 years ago, I was absolutely in shock the way they treat our people. They just take them in there, they handcuff them, they lock them up. They do not care about the family. They don't ask us any questions, or they don't ask the other person any questions. The criminal justice system just needs some type of compassion, and they need to understand that people make mistakes. People do make mistakes. And the healing process is the main process that I'm facing right now, because after being re-traumatized, I shut down for over 25 years. I never talked about my son being in life without parole. I never talked about my grandson being killed. Never talked about my brother being killed or other family members being killed. So the criminal justice system, it do not help us any kind of way. Even when our people are murdered, we get no type of service to counseling or just trying to heal. Yeah. So I think the criminal justice system is actually doing what it's built to do.
Okay.
Tear our people down and tear the family down too. So the family pays just in a community. So everybody is in pain from the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now, Jean, the same question to you. Before your loss, can you share with us your experience with the criminal justice system? Yeah,
I really didn't have any, because I was very young myself when that happened. But going through this, I'm seeing how horrible it is. Number one, the privatized prisons.
Yeah,
that just makes me gag. And what, am I allowed to say his name, who I'm advocating for?
Yes.
Gary has grown so much with his experience, where he could have gone there and said, to hell with this, I'm here for life, I ain't doing nothing. He's got degrees, he's done so much. And for the last merit review he had, they all voted no. And I'm like, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to prove to society? First off, he should have never got that sentence.
Yeah,
we found out accidentally that he didn't come home. We thought he was coming home. It's not rehabilitation. They're just putting everybody in a cage. And I'm sorry, this system is racist. It is so racist. So I'm here to fight. I'm here to fight.
Thank you so much, Jean, for sharing that with us. And if anybody wants to read about Gary Cowles, FAM did a wonderful article on him. So thank you so much, Jean. And Movita, what was your experience? Was your experience anything like Jean's or Antoinette, or, you know, prior to your loss or your first time, you know, dealing with the criminal justice system? What was your experience?
I agree with both Jean and Antoinette. The criminal justice system, well, the criminal injustice system is doing exactly what it's been designed to do. My experience with the criminal justice system prior to my loss was literally seeing my brother as a little Black boy being beat in the street by the police because he didn't move out of their way fast enough as he was riding his bike down the middle of our street. I would see them harass, you know, the Black and brown people in our neighborhood for no reason whatsoever. And then when we lost my father, I really saw how injustice worked because, you know, while my family saw what happened to my father and they saw the person that murdered my father, they locked up my stepfather who was not there that night. And he's been at SCI, formerly SCI Gradford, now SCI Phoenix. He's been there since 1975 for a homicide that he did not even commit. You know, even in the case of moving forward, when my son Charles was killed and I sought to talk to the two young men who murdered my son, I wasn't allowed that opportunity until I got the chance to make a victim impact statement. And even the judge was shocked when I asked for mercy for the two boys that murdered my son, because I realized that the system is designed against them. You know, when a homicide detective said to me, you know, Movita, while Charles was a pure victim, these two boys were going to harm someone. He said, you know, especially the one, we had him in and out of juvenile and in and out of adult, and we saw the progression, and we knew that he was eventually going to kill somebody. And I looked at this homicide detective like he had two heads. What I said to him was, so he's not responsible for my son's murder. You are.
Yes.
Because you had this young person and you knew that there was something wrong and you did not give him the resources and services that he needed to become a productive member of society. You just let it spiral out of control. And then my son was the result of y'all letting him spiral out of control. So the system is broken. It's doing exactly what it was meant to do. It's just the new form of slavery. You know, and I like what Jean said, there is no rehabilitation. Well, let's take another look at that. How can you talk about rehabilitation for people that have never been rehabilitated in the first place, right? Wow. So when we talk about the criminal justice complex, the criminal complex, the prison industrial complex, it is meant to house. It is meant to make money. It is meant for people to profit off of the bodies that sit there, right? She talked about privatization. Well, when we disinvest in communities of color, that's what we have. We have what we have today. When we disinvest in education, when we don't address the social determinants that lead to community violence, when we don't provide opportunity, when people are living in housing scarcity and food deserts, and there's lack of jobs, lack of resources, lack of food, then we're going to see the situations that we have now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And you just said a whole lot of factual information for all of us to let that sink in. Now, Jean, my next question to you is, you tapped on it when you had talked about the private jails and the private prisons. Can you share with us from the beginning of the process of the criminal justice system until now, what was one of the most shocking things that you experienced?
You know, I've been pretty for the most shocking thing was finding out that Gary was still in jail, and we found that out purely accidental. The most shocking thing I think that has happened was the merit review, where and this is my entire family. I would come from a family of 7. My mother and father has since passed, but we all agreed that this was wrong. Me and 3 of my sisters went up to the prison and visited Gary. Yeah. We wrote letters on his behalf. Gary has sent everything that he has accomplished in prison to this merit review, the board of 5. It was supposed to be, since he was a lifer, It had to be the majority. Well, one guy, I think it was Shapiro, he said yes. And then somebody said, what'd you say? And he, no, no, no. He said no. But then there was
Yeah.
over 4 people on the panel in the first place. So he did get another review.
Good.
But it's still only 2 to 3. And they're the same people that when he comes face to face with them that are going to vote for him.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I wish I had in front of me all of Gary's achievements, but they are many. And if you're talking about clemency and letting somebody come home after over 40 years, nobody has done more than this man. Why aren't they letting him? And what he can do for our communities when he comes home.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And yeah, the system sucks, and but we still have to start in the homes where people have empathy and teach their children that this isn't right. The racism out there is absolutely incredible. It boggles my mind, and thank God I was raised by good parents.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's going to start in the home too. We just can't go to the criminal justice system. We need to get out there and teach people that we are all the same person.
Yeah.
We are. You know, I come from a very poor area in Pittsburgh. The school district compared to our school district, the rich school district, the only difference between their kids and our kids is they get their drugs for free because mommy and daddy pays for them. Our kids don't have the money. They rob somebody for their drugs. That's the only difference. It's money.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Wow.
And
Thank you
Gary
so
went to
much.
prison because he was poor and black.
Yeah.
He would have never got life without parole. Never.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. It just hurts my heart. I can't. Does anybody mind if I smoke?
No, that's why Zoom is so convenient, because you're literally in the comfort of your home, you know. So Antoinette, is there something that really shocked you from the beginning to the end of like right now? What is something that just totally caught you off guard and just shocked you?
Okay,
Or your family?
I'm gonna go from the beginning. Years ago, I worked in the courthouse, and I was really shocked to see a white man, a black man got the same crime, but the black man get life without parole, and the white man get maybe 5 or 10 years. And the black man's trial lasts 45 minutes flat, 45 minutes, where you got the white man, where his only lasts maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So my thing is, what shocked me the most is how they're treating our black people, you know, how they're just throwing them in prison. And I mean, I worked in the courthouse, and I'm gonna say his name, Judge Manning is the most racist judge in Pittsburgh. He
Heard that
actually,
more than once.
he's a man, Judge Manning, yes. He actually called the co-worker, this is shocking, a nigger. One of my co-workers, he actually called them a nigger. And so I was just blown away.
Yeah, yeah.
And so from that, there's a lot of other things that I heard in the courthouse, how they just push stuff under the rug. If they can't find your case, if they can't find something, they don't even care. They don't care to look for it. The investigation is what they make up. So the shocking thing from then until now, it's all the same. It's modern slavery, Jim Crow, Willie Lynch. That's what's going on. Why would they pay so much money for our people to be locked up in a cage, but you can't pay them to go to college? Like, what's wrong with that picture? I go in front of the judge, I'm like, look, my son is signed up for college. He's a great student. Could we pay for him to go to college or on the inside? No. Anybody with life without parole don't have any rights to even go to college on the inside. Let's talk about the outside. They're not even sending our kids to college out here. You know, we have no resources for our children to grow from the streets. So it's just freaking crazy the way our Black people are treated from the criminal justice system. So my final line is, Modern slavery is here. Wake up, because slavery's here, and they're getting paid in a prison.
Wow. Thank you, Antoinette. And
You're welcome.
it's shocking that I remember, growing up, I always thought everyone is going to be, when you go into a courtroom, we both have the same charges. We're both ready to get the same time. And so what we have learned the hard way is that's just not the case. So thank you so much, Antoinette. And Movita, the same question to you. At the very beginning, like I said, we're ignorant. We don't know how the system work until today.
Mhm.
What was one of the most shocking things that you learned through this criminal justice system?
Couple things were very shocking to me. One, that they don't choose to listen to what the victims want, right? They want to pursue to the maximum extent of the law if it's a Black or brown person. But if the victim wants to ask for leniency, they'll tell you, that's not my job. My job is to get the maximum amount of time. But what's even more shocking to me than that, Terry? It's all the secrecy that's kept in the criminal justice system, right? All of it is intentionally racist. Let's talk about the grand jury and how all of that's secret and it's not exposed. Let's talk about how they will use people against each other and threat techniques and strong arming and blackmailing in order to get convictions. They will have, a lot of people who are in the criminal justice system are not necessarily guilty. Right? A lot of Black people come through the CJC, the Criminal Justice Center in Philadelphia, and they take a plea because, number one, they don't have money to be able to pay for an attorney. They know they're not going to get good representation with a public defender, and then they're being threatened to take plea deals, right? So the whole system, I just continue to be shocked at how overt the racism is. I mean, it's not even undercover. It's so overt and in your face. And then you have, even with the lifers who go up in front of, and Jean talked about this, who go up for review after review after review. And the same people keep knocking them down no matter how well they do. I did a lot of work. I was supervisor for victim and witnesses services out of DA Krasner's office. And when a lot of the juvenile lifers started coming home, we were doing a bunch of work, even with the silver foxes and the man ups and the different groups behind the walls. And those people could be more productive in stopping the violence and the crime in our community if they were on the street. Statistics even show that people age out of criminality, right? But it's so much easier and so much more profitable to keep them behind the walls.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And when you tapped on that everyone that's incarcerated is not guilty, and that took me to how any day of the week you could turn the TV on and you hear someone 35 years, 41 years they were gone, and now it's proven that they were not guilty. And the era, my mind go to what was our country like, what was our community like 41 years ago or 35 years ago? What was the police department like? What was the judges? My mind always go there. So thank you so much for tapping into that, Movita. And my next question, I'm gonna start with you, Movita. Now, tell us, because everyone is don't think like we do. Everyone don't feel like we feel. Tell us what do you say, or what would you say to a survivor or the survivor's family of how you feel about eligibility for lifers? to get parole?
Terry, I have had to have this conversation, right? As the
Mhm.
supervisor for victim witnesses services out of the DA's office. And then later I was a state representative and I actually fought for criminal justice reform
Yeah.
with some of my colleagues. What I tell people is that they need to look at the bigger picture, right? And I understand the pain of the loss. Listen, I understand. I lost my only two sons to bullets that were not meant for either one of them, right? But I also understand that there is a bigger force than that Black boy pulling that trigger behind all of this. I understand that the system is designed for these young people to resort to picking up guns. I understand that the system is designed for them to participate in criminal behavior. When they don't have other options, that's what they're going to do. Right. So I've had these conversations with victims, and you know what I say to them? It could have been your kid on the other side of that gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I say this, listen, my sons, I had two good sons who were doing the right thing. But you know what? All it would have took, Terry, was one bad decision.
Yeah.
My son could have been in the car with somebody who had a gun. Somebody could have came up with a gun. My son could have picked up that gun and pulled the trigger and been on the other side of that gun.
Yeah.
So I don't get that confused. And then we need to also realize it's not just my son, they're all our children.
Yeah.
And none of them are expendable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I, it took me to, I remember when my grandson was murdered and we were sitting in the courtroom and the young man who murdered him, I remember literally clear as day looking at him and looking, I'm behind him on the side. And I literally remember having the thought that tomorrow I'm going to wake up fighting that you do not do life without the possibility of parole. I remember distinctly having that. So I can totally relate to what you're saying, Movita. Thank you so much for that. And Jean, share with us, how do you share with, how do you share with people who may not understand, or a survivor that how can you put them in their heart to believe in parole eligibility for lifers?
I've also had this conversation, and my brother was no angel. And given enough time, he probably would have been on the other side of the gun. We always, as a family, said, Tony's not going to live to see his 18th birthday. And he didn't.
Yeah. Wow.
But only by the grace of God, he wasn't on that side of the gun. He could have been the one to shoot somebody. How would you feel if that was your son in prison? And that's the article you guys wrote for us. 2 mothers lost a son that day, not just one. And my family has always prayed for his mother. And then there's the race thing. There's always the race thing. Oh, well, well, why would you do that? He's like, hey, if he was white, would we still be having this conversation? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It always comes down to the race thing too. It really does. And it's infuriating.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you so much. And Antoinette, have you had this conversation
yes, I had the conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Share with us.
Repeat what I'm sharing.
Yes. So have you had the conversation that you have to literally explain why you are fighting for a lifer to have the possibility of parole, eligibility of parole? How do you explain that?
Yeah, that's a very hard, difficult conversation. But I had the conversation with my granddaughter, and I'm trying to explain to her and other people, like, the first step is forgiveness. We have to forgive on both sides, because if you don't forgive, then you walk around holding that in your heart, and that's heavy weight. So you have to let go and forgive. And that's the main thing. Forgiving and healing goes hand in hand. So I explained to my granddaughter, it was a very difficult conversation. It was her mother that was murdered. I was like, you have to forgive the person. And I never understood that when my mother told me to forgive the man that killed my brother. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to forgive him. I wanted to do to him what he did to my brother. But after I got older, I listened to my mother, I forgave him and moved on. So I would actually try to have, let me see, I would try to encourage people to forgiveness and
Yeah.
compassion, because it could be them, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So that's the biggest part, forgiveness and compassion and understanding and being able to relate.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, because we all know, we all know that hatred it weighs you down. It weighs you down and just make you bitter. So that's very important, Antoinette. Thank you so much. Movita, I'm gonna come back to you with, share with us your beliefs on what support is needed for survivors of violent crimes that is not currently being provided now. And who do you think could help with that?
Support that survivors need, that they are not being, so for number one, a lot of survivors are very bitter because they don't get closure, because they don't get an arrest, right? Even though I share with them all the time, that does not bring closure. It does not. Before that happens, it feels like that the person who caused the harm is going to be arrested, and you'll feel better, and that's not how it works. Then if you have an arrest, you go through a trial and you feel like, well, once this person is convicted, I'll get justice and I'll feel better. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
That loss is a loss and it's never coming back. And there's nothing that's going to fill that void. And throwing someone under the jail for the rest of the life does not fill that void. Right. So the first thing I think needs to happen is that we need to make sure that survivors have safe spaces to speak, to share their stories. Survivors also need to be able to, if they want to, have conversations with the person who caused the harm, right? And I was working toward that in the DA's office, Terry. We were working, Jody Dodd and I, towards building healing circles. And we were prohibited by the Office of the Victim Advocate for Pennsylvania, because what we were trying to do was connect, the person who's incarcerated with the family, because in many instances, the family wanted to talk to that person, but there was this whole red tape process in between the offender and the family, where the offender was supposed to write a letter and put it in this bank, and the family didn't even know that this letter bank existed to be able to go look for a letter. That system needs to be more seamless. And I think our state representatives can help to create that seamlessness, but there should be the opportunity that if the family wants to talk to this person, that they are given that ability. They should have the right, and vice versa. If that offender wants to talk to that family, that system needs to be maintained. It needs to be made more seamless and more easily available to both parties.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's powerful right there. That's powerful and needed. Thank you so much, Movita. And Jean, you as well, because you said something earlier. You said, your family didn't even know Gary was still locked up. And so what support could you and your family have used as survivors of a violent crime that is not happening now? What can families use?
The victims of violent crimes, I never heard of. So when we started this process, trying to get Gary released, they helped us. And she was saying, not being able to meet with the offenders. And so we had absolutely no problem. I don't know if it's the counselors that we went through, but we had no problem. They even brought it up to us, which was, I thought, phenomenal. Do you want to go visit him? Yes, we do. They met us as a group. They paid for us to get there. They paid for us to stay overnight. They said that we have to stay 2 days because only 2 people could go in at a time. We fought that. We said that's going to be too much on him. He's going to have to face us 2 days in a row. That's,
Wow.
and they arranged it so all 4 of us could see him at one time. Is it because I'm white? I don't know. You know, or is it because we were going up to see him with the, you know, with our hearts in the right place? I don't know. I don't know why we had it so easy and nobody else does. So that needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed immediately, because that was more, I don't like to use the word closure, but my heart never felt so good than after I met him.
Wow.
Yeah, he calls me. I mean, we're like a big family now. He calls. I talk to his mother. We go to his cousin's house. It was so healing. It was so healing to meet him. It's just unbelievable. And that needs to be fixed. I didn't know that there were so many problems out there with that.
Yeah. And wow. And then you hear Movita, you know, how they you know, how they have to go through all the red tape just to speak to
yeah, she was going through proper channels. She was working in the DA's office. My God, you would have thought she could have had that done.
Wow. And it speaks volumes, because the visit, how it not healed but helped you.
It did.
So
it did. I think
you,
we were already
for bringing that up. I'm sorry, Gene, what you said?
I said, I believe we were already healed. It just brought us close. That's what it did.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And what about you, Antoinette? What support do you think you could have used during your loss or during your son?
I needed a safe place to have the conversation. And that was the main thing, because like I said, I shut down, so I couldn't talk about it. So a safe place for people to talk and heal together. And I think it's very important for the victim and the defender try to get together, and because like the victims, they do want to talk to you know, the defender, and I think that's very important. Actually, Van had a show like that where he did it in California, and it was amazing. It was awesome. You know, it was awesome. So it lifts a lot. You know, that's support. That's how survivors get through this, by talking and telling their story to people that they could trust. That's another thing. We don't tell our stories because we have trust. I have trust issues. You know, you could tell your story and then somebody be like, oh, okay. The next thing you know is you don't see them no more. So empathy is the main thing that a survivor needs, and for people to listen and understand. Sorry, you hear the private department. I live on a busy street. So that's what a survivor needs support system, a strong support system. And the victim center is getting a lot of billions and billions of dollars. And I like to know where all that money is going, because it's not going into our community for us.
Wow.
Oh, can I respond to what Antoinette just said, Terri?
Please do.
Oh, girl, listen, that's a pet peeve of mine. So here's the thing. When Charles was murdered, I reached out to victim services organizations in Philadelphia. One organization never called me back, and I called them several times. And then another organization who was supposed to reach out to me never did, and I reached out to them because I needed help. Right, I felt like I was going to die in that moment, and I reached out to them, and I went to their groups. And after a couple of groups, we left there. I would leave feeling physically sick every time. I mean, to the point where I wanted to vomit. And I wound up telling my husband after a couple of visits, I'm never going back there again, because I literally would sit in those meetings and relive my son's homicide every time I sat in those meetings. And I guess I need to thank them in retrospect. Because of that, we created the Charles Foundation. And absolutely, and Charles is an acronym for Creating Healthy Alternatives Results in Less Emotional Suffering. I'm a social worker by trade and training, and I've been a therapist in the past. And what I found was that I needed a space, and I needed to be able to provide a space to others where healing could occur. Right? Not being re-traumatized, not reliving the tragedy, but where healing could literally occur. And one of the main roles in this group. I created the term survivors empowerment, because what we did was we had survivors empowerment groups where we empowered people to get involved in the fight to create less victims, not more victim services.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Antoinette said, we spend billions and billions of dollars on victim services. You know why? Because it's all about money. Black bodies dropping in Philadelphia and across this state and across this country is big business. Well, who gets paid? The criminal justice system gets paid, because when they incarcerate them, they're making money. Defenders, judges, prosecutors, hospitals. In Philadelphia, we're building multi-million-dollar trauma bays just for gun violence. So doctors, nurses, hospitals, social workers, victim services, why can't we take those billions of dollars that they're giving the victim services agencies to address the issue after the fact to prevent the issue in the first place?
Correct.
Why don't we reinvest in communities of color? Why don't we reinvest in public education? You know, our kids are being pushed through high school and some of them are graduating and can't even read. We're backwards. Even if you take a look at the war on drugs, it was a war on Black people. That's when we had the boom in mass incarceration.
Yeah.
So my thing has always been, like, even with the Charles Foundation, we've never solicited. Everything we've done from the muscle, because we didn't want money to dictate the work that we did with survivors. But the main goal of the work that we do is to create less victims, not more victim services.
Well, first, I want to thank Antoinette for bringing that up, so Movita can share that with us. I want to thank you, Antoinette, for talking about the victims. Where's the money going? And thank you, Movita. Thank you so much for that. So, Sheen, I'm gonna start with Antoinette. Antoinette, if you had the chance to have one thing change, what would it be if you had the chance to, with a legislator, the person who's going to write this bill and make it into law? What would it be?
I would actually tell that legislator to go visit the prison and sit down and talk to our people. In fact, just sit in the cell for a couple hours. Make that mandatory for them before they even get voted in. So that's my big thing. They need to go in there and talk to our loved ones and actually sit down in their space, and understand their world. So that's what I would say. I know you're looking for a different answer, like what laws should change, but I want them to go in there and talk to our people and have a real conversation. Because when they go in there, they just walk through real fast and they come out and say, oh, we visit this prison. BS. Go in there and talk to our people and see what's going on and try to help them and have compassion. Period.
Yeah.
If their loved ones was in there, I bet you they would go then.
Yeah.
I bet you they wouldn't.
Thank you.
Well, they should make it mandatory for all of them to go in prison and sit in the cell for a couple hours. And that's being nice about it. Put them in the hole. Don't get me started on that one because I have to go on.
Thank you, Antoinette. And please know this, your answer is your answer. There's no, that's your answer, so please feel comfortable and know that whatever you say, that's yours. Own it, And so, Sheen, if you had one chance to meet with a legislator, and this legislator can change a law throughout the criminal justice system, what would that be?
My thing would be to change the funding of our schools.
Okay.
Start in the beginning. I was on my school board. I know how the schools are funded. I know how the poor schools stay poor and the rich ones stay rich. And that's where it starts. That's exactly where it starts. These kids in my school have not one single outside activity, not one.
Yeah.
We have no parks in this area. We have 5 projects in this area.
Yeah.
And we live next to one of the richest school districts ever that have archery and a swimming pool and hockey and golf and you name it, they got it. Yeah. And they just got a grant and they built themselves a new football stadium. you know, and they just, and it's because of the funding. The
Yeah.
bottom line is especially the funding for special education. That's where, and that's where I would start.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because that really tapped in what Movita said earlier when she was saying, you know, if we had the resources in our communities,
Yes.
you know, that will stop a lot of, because you have nothing. And so they, you know, they rob or steal,
Yeah,
or, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, so that right there, it really hit on the head. Thank you so much, Jean. And I saved you last, Movita, for this question. So if you had a chance, go ahead, go for it.
I agree with what both Antoinette and Jean said. And I want to say, Antoinette, there are some legislators who go in and actually sit down and talk to the people who are incarcerated. One that I know of, who I have been in with for meetings, is Senator Sharif Street. But you're absolutely right. Most of them just go in for the photo ops and for the walkthrough, and don't believe just because somebody is Black or brown that they are advocating for Black and brown communities. I'm gonna put that out there. And while I agree with both of what you said, what I would add on top of what both of them said was to make everything that we do trauma informed. Right? So when I went to the House of Representatives, everybody, because they call me the gun lady, everybody expected the first piece of legislation that I put out that it would be on gun violence. It was not. It was on ACEs. It was on trauma-informed care. I think we need to make sure that we have proper funding in this Commonwealth for trauma-informed care. We need to stop funding those people who are doing business as usual with victim services and trauma therapy, and fund organizations like Jackie Johnson at Sankofa Healing, who works with communities of color, who does a wide variety of different therapeutic techniques like music therapy and art therapy and movement therapy and just all different kinds of therapy to address our children. But not only that, start engaging them younger in the schools. And if we make everything that we do in our communities trauma informed, then that means trauma informed in the schools. That means that maybe Sankofa Healing can go in, you know, to the local high school and do yoga therapy with children who are at risk, you know, do movement therapy with young people who are at risk. We need to make sure that everything that we do, because here's the thing, they're all traumatized.
Yeah.
They are all traumatized. All of these young people have PTSD because they live in active war zones, and then they all have trigger fingers. And listen, even the kids who don't want to carry guns. I engage these kids every day. I ain't scared of none of them. I done raised half of them, right? But a lot of these kids that don't even want to carry guns, Terry, are carrying guns because everybody got guns, but they're all terrified. My son Dante spoke in front of the House of Representatives. He spoke around the country, and he called himself an endangered species. And he said that he didn't believe that he was going to live to be the age of 21. He's not unique. They all think like this. They all feel like this. That's why it's so easy to take another Black life, because they don't value their own. So we need to start investing in their mental health, which has been taboo in communities of color for many years, to talk about mental illness in our communities. We need to make sure that we are addressing our young people's mental health to stop the next one from going in the cemetery and to stop the next one from going into the penitentiary.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now y'all see what I saved there for last. Go ahead, G. What you say?
I said, well said. Well said.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Movita. Now, before we go into our next steps and me introducing Roxanne, is there any questions?
Yeah.
No? Okay, good. So that means that everyone explained it extremely well. You know, so again, I want to thank everyone. Thank you so much. Roxanne, I'm going to introduce you to Roxanne, and she will tell you who she is. And Roxanne.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Miss Antoinette, Miss Jean, and Movita for speaking today. You shared so much that was so powerful and important. right? So as Terry said, I'm Roxanne. I'm the campaign director for Straight Ahead. Some of you have heard of Straight Ahead, but for those of you who haven't, Straight Ahead is the lobbying arm of the Abolitionist Law Center, and we exist for the purpose of advocating to end life without parole and to advocate for geriatric and medical parole, among other like extreme sentencing initiatives as well. So, you know, so we really care about these issues. We care about changing the law so that, you know, our people can come home. And what has been shared today is so important, because, you know, one of the first things that we hear in Harrisburg when we go and meet with legislators, especially ones that are more conservative on this issue, is what about the victims, right? What about the victims? We can't pass this legislation because the victims don't want it. But I think we have heard today that, you know, victims are not a monolith, and not all victims or survivors rather want the same thing. And but like, as was mentioned before, the Office of Victim Advocate, or the OVA, tends to push a certain narrative. You know, I believe more than one person said here that their voice was not listened to, like they didn't listen to me. And so, you know, there's this idea that people want to do what quote unquote victims want, but, you know, the reality is they only want that when it, you know, it pushes, you know, more incarceration, right? It pushes the agenda of the state, right? And so, but when that's not the case, then, you know, they can say that, oh, that's not my job, right? So, you know, it's only convenient. It's, you know, victims' narratives matter only when it's convenient. And so we want to shift that, because we want to show people in Harrisburg and people who have power, and like just people all over the state, that, you know, your voice has power. And that, you know, there are, you know, victims and survivors out there that are advocating for these issues, and that these are complex issues. And, you know, in order to push back on that narrative that is so often told and used as the, you know, the reason for not passing, you know, reform, right? And so here at Straight Ahead, like what we're really wanting to do is to create a network of survivors in order to advocate for these issues in Harrisburg, to counter that narrative of the OVA that has so much power in these issues, to go into Harrisburg and to talk to these legislators, to talk to these people in power and tell them our stories, right? To tell them your stories and to tell them why you're fighting for, you know, the people inside, and that your voice also matters, and that you're not uncommon either, right? You know, that, you know, there are many, you know, that, you know, feel this way, and that, you know, it's not just one narrative that deserves to be pushed to the forefront, that they should be considering all sides of this issue. And so I want to invite people here to join us, and especially like if you are a survivor or a victim and you have you felt moved by what was shared here, and it resonates with you. Terri will be sending out a follow-up email, and you will be able to reach out to Terri and connect with us. But in general, we want you to get involved in our campaign. This month, we have a few more events. Next week, we have a workshop on disentangling Harrisburg, which will go into the ins and out of Harrisburg, how legislation gets passed. Next week, the following week, we have a mass incarceration workshop and a how to lobby workshop. Zelba is dropping the links in the chat, so please check that out. We also have a feedback form we would like you to fill out, because, you know, we want to know how we can do better. And yeah, so that's all I have. You know, I thank everybody for coming, and I hope to see all of you soon. And if people want to stick around and chat, you know, please feel welcome. And you know, I know Terri asked if there's any questions, but if people have anything they would like to say to our panelists, please feel free to share. And this is an open space where we want to hear what you have to say. So that's it for me.
And please give our panelists, our amazing panelists, a round of applause, please, or a heart, or thank you so much. Thank you, Movita. Thank you, Sheen. Thank you, Antoinette, for letting us into your space.
Thank you
You're
all.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for
welcome.
including my voice. Thank you.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Love you, Movita.
Yeah,
you
you need
too.
your own talk show, girl.
Yes, she
Great job,
does.
everybody.
does.
This was wonderful.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Nadia.
I'm working on it, Miss Jean. I actually just
Okay.
finished my first memoir, Phoenix Ascending: My Rise from the Ashes. So I'm working on it.
All right, I'm buying it.